Hello, I'm Tanya L. Whiteside, visionary for the Whiteside Group. Tonight we will have a discussion about quarantine, locked in abusive environments. Intimate partner violence affects millions of people every day, including our youth. Tonight we have a panel discussion for you. We encourage you to join in the discussion. I'd like to introduce our panel for this evening. We have evangelist Danielle Belton. Danielle Belton is anointed and a woman of God who is called and chosen to be an end time vessel for the Lord. She created and was called to the Purpose, Promise, Destiny Ministries Incorporated. And this ministry has exploded into a viral ministry. Again, it is the Promise, Purpose, Destiny Ministry. It has exploded. They are online, and to date, they have over 12,000 members. They have Bible teachings, they work with youth, and they promote healthy relationships regarding kingdom initiatives. She is a praying woman who knows and believes in the power of prayer. She's also a college graduate. She is married, has 4 children, and 7 grandchildren. Please welcome Danielle Belton. Hello. I'd also like to introduce Lisa Smith, who is a LMFT, which is a licensed marriage family therapist. She has over 20 years experience working with children and families and at-risk youth in a variety of settings. She also has experience in staff training, forming meetings and in-services for community providers, as well as social work staff. She also has experience with investigations, crisis intervention, and counseling for children and families. Again, let's welcome Lisa Smith. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, how are you?
Great. I'd like to also introduce Marissa Charlotte Presley. She started out as an advocacy training and career specialist in a nonprofit domestic violence shelter in South Orange County over 15 years ago. She is currently a bilingual prevention education specialist for Human Options, where she educates individuals from diverse middle schools, high schools, colleges, universities, and abroad for the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. Now, Marissa has sat on numerous committees and subcommittees for the California Partnership to End Domestic Violence. She's also a former case manager at the emergency shelter, and prior to that, she was an advocate at a 24-hour crisis hotline. Let's welcome Marissa.
Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Peace, love, and harmony. Thank you.
Hi. And finally, we have Tanya McLean Nicholas, who is a practicing licensed marriage and family therapist with over 20 years experience working in the domestic violence organizations. She's worked with adults with special needs. She's also worked with maternal and infant health. She has a bachelor's degree in social work and a master's degree from Bethel Seminary and Theological Studies. She also counsels couples and adolescents, and she does enjoy teaching on strategies for healthy living through her through her talk show called Tuesday Talk Therapy. And she also will be sharing with us some other informative places where we can find her platform. Let's welcome Tanya.
Good evening. Good evening.
Yes. Welcome, everybody. So I wanted to get us started tonight really talking about relationship abuse. And there have been this new term that I found out about, intimate partner violence. That's a new term. I know it's been out there. We've just heard about dating violence, teen dating violence. Marissa, I want to start with you because I know you've been working with a lot of youth. When it comes to teen dating violence, in this last year, have you seen a change in what's been happening with teen dating violence?
Yeah, absolutely. I have definitely seen a change where I used to get to see them face to face and they could disclose to me and I was able to, file child abuse reports. I don't get to see them face to face in an environment where they feel safe enough to, wait for me after class. Now I'm having to be on Zoom. So it's difficult. So what I'm getting is a lot of emails, and it's very difficult to really get the full story via an email, where in the past I would be in front of the child and I would tell the child, everything you tell me is confidential except these things. I have to report these things. Do you still want to talk to me? And guess what? They still wanted to talk to me. A lot of the reports that I'm seeing also is that the type of abuse is changing. Of course, we're seeing a lot of more digital abuse. And digital abuse has, we need an entire army, Tanya, right now to help us deal with digital abuse. One thing that's really interesting that has happened because of advocacy work and visiting Sacramento and talking to legislators is that two things. One, digital abuse now is against the law and it is considered a felony if you're over 18, and it's a misdemeanor if you're under 18. If you were to share any semi-nude, nude photos or videos of somebody that you used to date or somebody that you thought you were dating or somebody that you're currently dating, it's against the law. It's called revenge porn law. And another thing I'm excited about is that we have gotten the governor to sign a new bill into law that now mandates every single school in California to have on the back of the student ID card, the National Domestic Violence Hotline number. So that makes me feel good about the work that we are doing, Tanya.
Awesome. Thank you. And Lisa, I know that as well, you shared that you've done a lot of training. Have you had to add things to your training as you have people going out into the field?
Yes. Again, with the way that, the pandemic is, and with children not being able to be in front of counselors and teachers, we definitely had to add this idea of, getting children engaged over the internet, being able to have times where they still can talk to a teacher online. Again, having those numbers and emails and hotline numbers are really important for children to still have some type of contact with those professionals that can reach out to help them. Because we're in this sort of, again, isolation, abuse in it of itself is already a secretive, a secretive idea. And so to have children kind of, like you said, locked in quarantine in their home to keep them safe from the pandemic has created this other sort of continued silence that they can't reach out again like they would normally do if they were in the community, going to school, being seen by doctors and all of that. So it's really something we had to add to the curriculum.
And thank you. And Danielle, I know that you have shared that you've done camps and you do get-togethers for your youth. Have you been able to do more with them in this year of change and different things that we have going on?
Well, currently it had been challenging due to the pandemic and due to COVID-19, because I also served as a youth pastor where I do deal with a lot of young women. And it had been challenging to be able to get together for us to kind of do meet and greets during this time. But I'm so grateful that now we are able to come together, even though with a little bit of the social distancing and things of that nature. But I believe that because domestic violence has some sense of isolation and humiliation and shame attached to it as a stigma. One thing I love is that being able to see the youth face to face is so very important. A lot of times you can read what a child is going through or what a young woman is going through or even a young boy is going through by looking at them, by talking to them, by encountering them. And so I'm so thankful that even at this time that we are able to have more in-person contact, and then it makes it a little bit more clearer on how you can able to deal with them. When you can ask those questions and look into their eyes and you can see them and what they're dealing with, that makes a world of difference, definitely during this environment.
Thank you. And Tanya, I know that you counsel couples, and you and I actually had a conversation about, because a lot of our students have been online, they don't have that safe space for school. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because that was eye-opening, not even thinking about the fact that some of our young people are safer when they are at school, but in this last year, they've been home. Have you had to change things in your meetings, or have you noticed some different things in light of that? I think you might be muted.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I said over the last year, I've probably spent the last year virtually with my clients, pretty much seeing them online, and that's probably very difficult in general because obviously they're in the homes, with their parents. When you see children in person, they tend to speak more and they're more open. But in general, the quarantine has definitely affected the youth overall. I think their mental health overall has just been affected. There's been the closures of the schools, obviously. There's facilities that have been closed, which has just been an added stress in general. Virtual learning has been an added stress because parents are working, parents are dealing with their own stressors, such as the economy. Definitely financial issues have been going on. So parents are stressed and they're trying to find a balance between working at home, trying to find a balance between monitoring their kids or, having to leave their kids at home or having to stay in the home. And so children in general, or youth in general, they spent 7 hours probably of every day at school. And that was the place where they knew that they could be safe. They knew that they had a place to speak to other adults. They had a place to commune with other peers. And so that's the social distancing quarantine overall has just been, a serious hardship for them because there's been no place for them to go. After school programs are closed. Boys and girls clubs have been closed, and different community programs have been closed. So it's been challenging. And then, of course, when they had these interactions with these other adults from these programs, there was mandated reporters, such as teachers or clinicians or anybody who were there to basically speak to the kids and ask about what may be going on in their home, or being able to assess and see what's actually happening with them. So in general, it has been a hardship overall.
Yeah. So I want to take a step back and let's just look at abuse. I mean, everybody has their own definition of what they believe abuse to be. Marissa, how would you define abuse?
Yes, thank you for that, Tanya. So abuse is defined as a coercive act that repeats itself over and over. That makes a lot of sense, right? Because it's not a one-time isolated incidence of violence. No, this is something that is a pattern of abuse. And once that pattern is established, it is very difficult to transform it, right? And what happens is abuse is it's insidious. It doesn't start off with a punch or a kick or a slap, because if it did, then a lot of us would be able to walk away early on in the relationship, right? Even in the first couple of dates. But it's very mental. It's emotional. Some of the abuse that a lot of us have endured in our lifetimes with intimate partners, we can see it now, but we don't talk about red flags, Tanya. We're not teaching what does a red flag look like. And okay, now that you know what a red flag is, if you're talking to a youth, now you can identify a red flag, right? What can you do? What are your rights? You can walk away from a red flag. I think a lot of us, when we're trying to teach our kids how to date, we're not really sitting down to talk about red flags. So if we talk about red flags, we could possibly be helping a youth not enter into the cycle of violence that's so it's difficult. Most high school students actually stay in an abusive relationship for 2 years. And then for another 2 years after that, they are stalked and pursued and bullied and harassed. I want to give you just some data that is really important, because it is April, National Child Abuse Prevention Month, and a lot of us are wearing blue, so that's exciting because it is Blue Ribbon Month. And what happens is that the National Committee to Prevent Child Abuse says that domestic violence is listed as the major factor that contributes to the growth of reports of child abuse. In Orange County, for example, this is a county where Human Options is, we hear that over 36% of 911 calls are for help for domestic violence, and they're made by children. Children are calling for help.
Wow. Thank you for that. So I've heard a statement that oftentimes children or teens who witness domestic abuse in their homes are more likely to repeat that pattern in their own relationships as either a victim or an abuser. Lisa, have you seen that? Are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. like you said, because it's a isolated incident, but over time it becomes a pattern for families, and so children who are in that pattern see it as, well, this is just normal. This is how my parents were. This is kind of how they showed love. Because sometimes even that negative attention is seen as a way of showing love, and so yes, they often repeat these patterns in their adulthood, not even knowing that it's a bad pattern to repeat. Children who are usually exposed to domestic violence are exposed to some type of child abuse or exposed to some sort of neglect. There's usually other factors in that home that also create this sort of one stigma, and also this area of, again, this is still a safe place. And so they tend to repeat the cycles, unfortunately. So these are these generational cycles and generational patterns that sort of happen over time. And at some point, like you said, a social worker or a teacher or a nurse or a neighbor can kind of help stop those patterns, but they need to know that, again, this is not a healthy relationship. This is not a healthy cycle to have. And so, again, we're hoping that these discussions and, having those connections are going to really help stop these generational curses and generational patterns that happen over time with our children.
Yeah, I see you, Danielle, shaking your head. You want to add to that?
Just a little bit, as I am dealing with even in ministry, there's abuse in ministry. That's just the truth. There is abuse in ministry. Ministry is not exempt from, dealing with people that are being abused, people who are suffering from domestic violence. And one thing that I have discovered in ministry, the word abuse, I had an enlightenment regarding the word. The word abuse is abnormal use. When you don't understand and know the value of someone or something, you abuse it. When you don't understand the worth of something or somebody to you, or how to walk in relationship with that person or thing, you abuse it. And so what happens even with ministry is that we sometimes get the stigmata of people don't want to talk about abuse in ministry because of religion. And so that's another area that must be dealt with as far as domestic violence and abuse, is that it does happen under a religious umbrella. It does happen in the churches, and those people also need to be cared for. They need to be heard, and they need help just like anybody else. And so that's what we deal with here in PPD as well. We are also a ministry that is confidential. I believe in confidentiality, so that this is a safe place that people can come if they are being abused, if they're being abnormally used, if they're not being valued. And that's what we teach here in PPD. Also, you have got to know your worth. And as a founder of a ministry, you must know who you are. And when you have value within yourself, it's tough for somebody else to devalue you.
All right. Thank you for that. And you mentioned confidentiality. Tanya, can you speak to that? Because it's important, if people are coming to you, for them to know that they're in a safe space. Have you found that they are willing to share when they come in to see you?
Absolutely. I think that's something that I discussed in the very beginning with all of my clients, especially with young people, is that they have a safe place. If there is confidentiality, you are my client. And so therefore, what you express to me stays with me, between you and I. However, I do not, obviously, don't hold secrets, number one. And also, if you're in danger, or if someone else is in danger, if you're a danger to yourself or someone else is in danger, I can't keep that secret. So I do tell my clients up front, the realm of what that confidentiality can look like. And if it's based on their welfare or their safety, then that's not something that I definitely keep confidential. But clients do open up, and they will share what's happening. If something they have, I should say, my experience has been that they have shared if they're in an abusive situation. And at that point, especially during this COVID time, it's really interesting. During the pandemic time, because it's been virtual, and usually kids are in their homes with their parents, there is not as much transparency about what's happening. Kids are a lot more quiet online and virtually. And so I believe that now that things have opened up and we'll have the pleasure of getting back in person, I believe that we're going to see an increase and a rise in a lot of disclosures, especially coming from young people.
Right. Thank you. I'd love to hear everybody's perspective on this. Healthy, unhealthy, abusive. Healthy, unhealthy, and abusive. I have seen that not just our young people, but adults as well have a hard time knowing the difference between healthy, unhealthy, and abusive. I'll start with you, Marissa.
Thank you. But may I say something that came up to me when Danielle was speaking about abuse in ministry, and I really appreciate that she's using her voice to speak up about something as tragic as this. It's different than the abuse of power in somebody that holds power in a ministry and holds power over their congregants. There's a type of abuse in intimate partner violence or in relationship violence that we call spiritual abuse. And I wish that, maybe we can meet for another hour at another time for your show, Tanya, so we can definitely discuss what is spiritual abuse and what that looks like. But it just brought it to my mind, and I wanted to thank Danielle for speaking about that. So I have actually, Tanya, you said healthy, unhealthy, and abusive. I have one more, if you don't mind, that I want to add.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
So after healthy, I want to add toxic, right? Because there's unhealthy that we sometimes can recognize. Then there's toxic relationships. Then there's unhealthy that leads to abuse. So one of the things that we do at Human Options is we have conversations with youth. Hey, if your partner checks your phone, what does that fall? What category does that fall in? There's like a spectrum, right? And then we ask the parents the same question. And the difference in the responses is really like surprising to me, because what a lot of parents seem to believe that is just, kids being kids. A lot of the youth are saying, no, like this is abusive. This is abuse. It's they don't trust me. So checking on your phone or asking or sending nude photos unsolicited. That's something that I've been seeing a lot, unfortunately. And this is the shocking part. Not that youth are sending photos that are unsolicited of, body parts. It's that the reaction from the youth who is receiving it, it's so normal. Like that's the way they're dating nowadays. It's like courtship almost. Then a lot of individuals are asking, well, that can't be healthy for the development of a boy. Usually it's the boy who is sending the photos. Yeah, but it's also not healthy for the development of the young girl who's receiving these photos, right? And just like Lisa mentioned earlier, I think it was Lisa. Was it Lisa? No, Danielle mentioned earlier, this happens to men as well, and it happens to young men. So there's a huge difference between what is healthy, respect, admiration, trust, and most importantly, safety. There's no love involved. I'm not in love with you, Tanya, and we have a healthy, respectful relationship. So we have to take that love out of this whole healthy, unhealthy, abusive relationship, because I think one of the panelists mentioned earlier that a lot of us believe that this is love because it looks like love, it smells like love, it feels like love, but it's control and it's power. So I'm loving that you're having this conversation. Thank you, Tanya.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, again, that whole unhealthy, toxic is this unbalance of control. So it happens in ministry. Like you said, it happens with our teens. It happens when there's an unhealthy balance of control or dominance or isolation from a person. That kind of automatically sets up this power dynamic that lets that person who is the abuser be in power. So, healthy relationships, there's an exchange, there's communication, there is not feeling this, this idea of control. There is a healthy way to have a relationship. So anytime that there's a power imbalance, whether that's a teacher, a pastor, a teen, anytime you have that unbalance of control and somebody feels like they can kind of take over, that's where you get those toxic relationships. But because, again, those generational curses or families don't understand that that is not a healthy relationship. Oh, he just loves me. Like, no, he doesn't. He is trying to control you. He is trying to manipulate you. He is putting you in this unpowered, balanced way so that you feel, again, your self-esteem is shot. You don't feel like you have any way out. And so, again, this pandemic has created, again, this isolation. And so that's kind of where you get, again, these discussions are helpful. These discussions are needed so that people can, reach out to the help and get the help that they need.
Tanya, can I add to that?
Yes, absolutely.
If I'm listening. First, I think it's important to understand that our ability in general, and this may just be the therapist in me that's saying this, but I think our ability in general to understand or form healthy relationship is definitely influenced by our early attachment experiences. So in other words, as children, we learn how to form attachments and bonds at an early age. And if we have these secure attachments, then yeah, where our needs are, we have needs and they're being met, we're more confident, we're secure, we feel protected, we're able to regulate ourselves and our emotions, we build trust. But if that attachment is disrupted by violence or abuse, or even some sort of high stress, I think the opposite occurs, where we become fearful, distrustful, we struggle with emotions, negative beliefs, negative thinking about ourselves, poor self-worth. All of that is formed. And I believe that sets the stage for our understanding and even our belief about what defines a healthy relationship. So I think it starts there. And so people may have never learned that relationships take commitment and work, that they require healthy communication, mutual respect, kindness, compassion, supporting one another's life goals and journeys. And it's absent of jealousy and competition, or building trust and or just even the willingness to grow and evolve. Like that, I think, defines healthy relationship. But for many people, they don't. They get in these relationships, and yeah, they're toxic and they're unhealthy, but this may be norm. You know what I'm saying? That may be what they've seen. That may be what it's healthy to them because it's maybe something that they have function in. And so you're right, be preventative and being able to teach, as she said earlier, our young people, what defines a healthy relationship and what does that really actually look like?
Thank
Yes,
you.
can I add there, Tanya?
Absolutely.
As Tanya was speaking, is the word dysfunction it was what I was thinking of when she began to speak as well, is that it may seem to somebody on the outside toxic or unhealthy, but it's functional because that's what they learned, because they were able to function in it, because in the domestic violence, if their parents stayed together for 30 years, but there was domestic violence all throughout the marriage, they still functioned. And so I believe that I love this platform, and we need to be able to help kids distinguish, young adults, young women, young men, distinguish what is normal, but what is dysfunctional, what is healthy, what is toxic and yet dysfunctional. It could be toxic, but to them it's functional. So that predicates normalcy to them, and then they don't look at it as abuse. And I'm seeing that as well. And even in ministry, is that because they've been there so long, and even children who have parents who are in ministry, that's what they function. Spiritual abuse, we got to talk about it. We got to talk about it, because then it brings in manipulation, and it brings in control, and it brings in desensitization to behaviors that are detrimental to you emotionally, spiritually, physically, sociologically, and mentally. And we have to be able to bring education in, and then let them know that it's okay. That's okay. And one thing I did wanted to make clear, even as ministry, is that yes, it's a safe place, but of course we are mandated reporters. If something's going on, we're definitely going to make sure that their safety is key, and that we're going to make sure somebody gets the help they need. But this is so good, because this is an area that is considered taboo in the religious culture, and we've got to start talking about it.
Yeah, thank you. And I would love for everybody to add examples of what this abuse looks like, because someone may think it's just physical. What are some of the things that, when you think about abuse that's happening every day, what are some of those examples?
When you're
Tanya,
talking, are you
go
asking
ahead.
about spiritual abuse, Tanya? Yeah.
Not just spiritual, physical. What is it? What are some of those types of abuse?
Of course, if I may, I'm going to talk a little bit about spiritual abuse, because I think, like, most of us have said on this panel, it's one of those taboo subjects, right? So, when your partner, your intimate partner, makes fun of your God, they make fun of your religion, they put down your traditions, they put down your holidays, they don't let you participate in any of your activities with your congregation, or we can flip it, they force you to believe and to praise a God that you're not even familiar with. But also, we can go beyond that. Spiritual abuse, we can take out all of the spiritual religion part, and we can talk about when your partner constantly puts you down, they embarrass and humiliate you, sometimes in private, sometimes in public. When your partner puts down your ideas, makes fun of your dreams, does not give you that space where you can actually have an opinion, that's spiritual abuse. And the breaking down of the human spirit, as far as I'm concerned, and as an advocate and as a preventionist, is probably the most dangerous type of abuse, because it breaks down the human spirit. These are the individuals that we're most likely not going to see in any of the, after mass or after church or after service. We're not going to see them hang out afterwards. They're going to go straight to their car if they even get permission to attend the service. They're very isolated individuals, people who are spiritually abused. And I'll leave the other types of abuse for the other guests.
Yeah. Lisa, can you speak on that? Lisa?
Yeah, I was trying to unmute. I don't know what's going on. Well, of course, working in child welfare, there's definitions regarding neglect and, like you said, domestic violence and physical abuse. And I think what we're describing around this whole spiritual abuse is this emotional abuse that's really kind of hard to determine. But most of the time when children are having some other physical abuse or neglect, then that also translates into some type of emotional abuse that's sort of harder to kind of deal with. It's harder to see because it's about their own personal emotions and how they're feeling. And if they can't talk about it, and if they can't describe it, if they don't have a bruise or if they don't, have some physical ailment that folks can see, it's hard to describe feelings. And so I think, again, having these conversations is important. Having these platforms is important, especially, for African-American families who we're, kind of coming into this new mental health realm that we can kind of talk about what's going on in our homes, that we can kind of have discussions like this. And so I think it's just important to know that there's this emotional thing that, again, what happens in my house stays in my house. Or that's kind of what the thought was. And so I think having these continued discussions is going to be really important. Of course, for elder abuse, there's financial situations that they're abused when, family members are not taking care of elderly, the elderly too. And so all of us can be affected by some type of abuse in and out, kind of depending on what's going on in their life. And so I think just, again, having the discussion is the biggest thing, so they'll know that there's places to reach out.
Yeah. And Tanya, you mentioned that some of the individuals that you've worked with, not just elderly, but disabled. Can you talk about the type of abuse that happens there? Tanya? Uh-oh. She may be frozen. I think she looks frozen.
A little bit.
Yeah. Let's talk about that comment you said, Lisa, about not sharing what happens in your home. I know that saying is also do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
What do you think about that? I mean, because when you grow up, sometimes you go, wait a minute, is that really true?
Right. I think that's what I'm saying. Like, so it's hard to say sometimes that abuse line for some of our African-American families are, if you traditionally were disciplined in a certain way, you might not see that as abuse. That it doesn't fall into the definition of what we would for, again, for social workers in the penal code or for our police to have a criminal investigation, but it's real close to, so you have to really educate families on, I understand that you have every right to discipline your child and you have every right, to do that, but it is a way to do it safe and protective and not in an abusive manner. So I think that's just the hard part and because of the pandemic, it has kind of just created this whole another secrecy that is hard to talk about. It's kind of, because it's just seen as normal. It's seen as natural. Like this, it always happens in our house. So if spankings always happens or whoopings or whatever we want to call them in our, in our generation, then they see someone fighting or yelling or angered or whatever. They just see it as normal. So, so again, having the discussions and knowing that African-American families still have the propensity for abuse, is you just got to know that it's a thing, and have conversations so children feel safe. So we're not saying you can't discipline your child, but there's a difference between abusing your child.
Right.
Yeah.
Tanya, I was asking
Yes,
if you
I got
could
a little
share.
frozen.
Yeah. Can you hear us now?
Okay, what was your question?
Yeah, my question was,
I can hear
you've
you.
mentioned that you
I can hear you.
you work with elderly, but also disabled. I wanted you to maybe share a little bit about the type of abuse that happens there.
Well, when I worked with special needs kids, it was actually on the school campus, working with those that were had special needs or severely emotionally disturbed kids, as well as those that were operating on IEPs and whatnot. So, I mean, I think one of the things that I've kind of just learned in regards to that population in general is that they are more vulnerable in general, because they don't have sometimes the ability or the outlet to be able to they don't actually, I should say, they don't even have the cognitive skills sometimes, or even the vocabulary to be able to speak up and to say what's actually going on with them. Parents people who are parenting special needs kids have a hard job. It's very, very stressful. It can be very challenging, and sometimes having the appropriate resources can be difficult. And so therefore, I mean, I definitely have seen it. It's definitely prevalent. It's something that's also not, I think, as much. I think that the support, there needs to be more of the support in that area. Can you hear me, or am I cutting out?
No, I hear you. I hear you. Thank you.
Can I make a comment? I want to make a comment that someone had said earlier when we were talking about, when you asked what does that abuse kind of look like, or healthy relationships look like, or what does the abuse look like? I thought about, someone said it earlier about teenagers and teens, and their perception of what healthy love is, or their perception of what is right within a relationship. And I think about teenagers who tend to believe that that jealousy, or if he gets jealous, or if he tends to he or she, it doesn't have to be he or she tends to get jealous, or become very possessive, then that's actually love. Then they must really like me. They must really love me. They really want to be with me. So I thought about that and that dynamic in teaching. When we talked about educating our young people, letting them know that that doesn't equate to love because someone wants to be around you all the time. It doesn't equate to love because someone is mad because they see you with another boy, or they see you with another girl. That doesn't equate to love. That they have to really understand. No, that isn't. Actually, having healthy individuality and autonomy is important in a relationship, and being able to respect each other's space, and boundaries, that's important. And so I think, when someone said that earlier, it made me think about the fact that that's something that we have to consider too, when it comes to teaching our young people about what is healthy love, what is healthy relationships and dynamics.
And we had a question in the chat that I want to make sure we respond to. And Danielle, I'd like for you to respond. It says, does spiritual abuse still happen when you're both equally yoked? It's an interesting topic that someone who is a counselor, and they wanted someone on the panel to speak to that.
That's my brother, Alex Smith. One thing I will say about, as Marissa was talking about spiritual abuse, you can talk about the human spirit, but there's also another aspect of spiritual abuse, which is religion and, the Bible and all of those type of things. When you're talking about being equally yoked with somebody, or somebody that is comparable to who you are, as far as complementary, according to, as believer, non-believer, this type or the other, I think that's a loaded question, because we are all still human, and spiritual abuse can still happen in any type of relationship, whether you are equally yoked or not. But are you doing the word of God? So, when you're talking about spiritual abuse, if you're a leader, and as Marissa had stated earlier, if, you're a pastor or whatever, and you're a first lady and you're controlled and not going to services, how you have to dress, you're being belittled, or there are also instances where, husbands, will flirt in front of his wife, with other parishioners, and just different things that begin to happen in there. So my answer to that can be, yes, it still can happen, even if you are equally yoked, because of the fact that there could be some misconstrued miscommunication. Could be one of them's not doing the word of God. Equally yoked is much more deeper than just having abuse going on. If you're still not able to recognize who that person is and the worth of that person, and if you're not following the word of God, then yes, there can still, in my opinion, Alexander, there still can be spiritual abuse, even though you are yet equally yoked.
Thank you. And there is a question from Shauna Chambers, who wants to talk about in the professional workplace. And Lisa, I thought you could speak to this. And she wanted to know, do professionals take action on behalf of children being abused emotionally and mentally?
If I understand the question, most of, professionals who work with children or families in some type of form are mandated reporters. And so hopefully, if they've had training to kind of recognize what abuse could look like, or, see it and be able to report it, your job is to just report. It doesn't have to be, at this point, it is just that. It is just a report of suspected child abuse. You don't know if it's really happening. It's not your job to investigate. It's just your job to, as a mandated reporter, to make that report. And then whatever, child welfare agency will receive that report through a hotline. And then, depending on the type of abuse that's noted, then they will respond either immediately, within 24 hours, or within 10 days. And so it kind of depends. If folks are reporting what they believe is suspected abuse, then professionals are involved and will do their part to, do their investigation, and hopefully they're doing a complete investigation and a balanced investigation, and asking everyone that they can, and they gather all the information and they kind of determine whether they believe abuse is happening. And that doesn't automatically mean that a child is going to be removed from a home, or that, child welfare agencies can intervene at any level. And the goal is to keep families together. I know that's kind of this misnomer that the goal is to remove children, but our goal is really to keep children and families together and provide an intervention, a prevention, education. And if you can do that, that's kind of, again, why these panels and having all these providers on here is important, because the goal is to keep children and families together and intact. A child in even that environment is better than being in a child welfare system. That they're not meant to raise children. Families are meant to raise children. So having these resources and these panels and these discussions and prevention is what's important. So hopefully professionals are doing their part.
Thank you. There's a question from Latanya Wilson Clayton, and she says, with them sending photos, and maybe Marissa, you can speak to this, of their body parts, can this be a form of sexual harassment? And how do you talk to your teens about sending these photos? And all of you can add to that if you like.
Yes, absolutely. But may I just for a quick second talk on what Lisa was just talking about in the question that came in earlier. In the state of California, it is actually considered child abuse for any child to be witness to domestic violence, intimate partner violence. That means a child that lives in a home where there's yelling and screaming and cussing and cursing and pushing and shoving, and that child is simply watching or hearing, that's child abuse. So I've actually, for every domestic violence call I've ever done or taken, accepted through the 24-hour crisis hotline, if there's children in that home, I've done a child abuse report, because it is considered child abuse. So that's just that point. But as far as your question, what's happening is, yes, it is definitely considered harassment, but it's becoming very common. And it's something that culturally, for youth, receiving an unsolicited photo of a body part, now children are considering that, oh, look, he likes me. And they're not shocked by it anymore. But what's happening also is that there's unconsented photos taken or unconsented videos. Children think they can consent to sex because, they both said yes, but children can't consent to sex. And what's happening is that they think they consented to sex, but then there's these videos being done. Name a high school right now in Orange County. And Tanya, you know this, you work in a high school. I'm talking high schools from South Orange County, Central Orange County, all the way to North Orange County. And I've worked on so many cases where the child, a female identified individual, has no idea that she was videotaped, having sex with her boyfriend. And then she wants to break up with him because of the abuse that she's been enduring, but she has to stay in that relationship because of the threat. I've worked on a lot of cases like that. And what's happening now, and I was telling Tanya earlier when we chatted about this show, is that I'm hearing a lot of stories, unfortunately, that go beyond that. Some of the stories I'm hearing about digital abuse are that the male identified individual, who is the person who's harming — in the past we used to call this person the abuser, the aggressor, the batter. Now we call them the person who harms. They're manipulating or guilting their partner into watching porn with them because they can't hang out, they can't see each other. So they both log on to the same porn site and watch porn together. But what I'm hearing from the youth who are forced to do this is that they don't want to participate in that, but they feel that they must in order to maintain and stay in this really unhealthy, abusive relationship. One more point I want to make is that 96% of all of the youth in the United States who are experiencing digital abuse, unfortunately, are also experiencing other types of abuse on top of that. So we really, I thank you personally. Some of the stuff that we're discussing today is what I discuss, at high schools, at middle schools, at colleges and universities, but we need more of this. And as a Brown Indigenous woman, earlier when Lisa was talking about mental health, I was thinking, we don't talk about mental health in my family, my familia, my culture. It's like, oh, shh, don't talk about that. No. Right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Danielle, I'll ask you. Ari put this here, and I think as we are starting to close, I would love for everybody to share some things that people can do, teens can do, even adults can do. But Ari says that many teens are struggling with the humiliation and the isolation. What is some advice to encourage students to speak to a person that they trust?
The first thing that I would say is to actually find somebody you can trust. Find somebody that you can trust, whether it's an older adult, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a counselor, whether it's your pastor, whether it's a first lady, or whether it's a neighbor's mother, somebody that you can talk to. Number one, who's going to support you. Number two, who's going to listen. A lot of times young people think that we don't believe them. And so there's already a generation gap between the young people and us. And so there's already a built-in place of a mistrust already built in. What we've got to do is be able to break down those barriers and allow the young people to know that, yes, we love you. Yes, we hear you. Yes, your opinion is important. Yes, your voice deserves to be heard. Very important that they realize that they have a voice that deserves to be heard, because remember, in abusive situations, a lot of times their voices are taken away and they become isolated, and they begin to separate, and they begin to feel shame. So once we allow them to know that we are a safe place where they can open up and to help them restore their voice, then they will begin to pour out, and then they will begin to speak, and then we'll be able to take action. And so that's really important in young people. I find when I give them a safe place to just talk and I just listen, and I'm not going to say nothing. I'm not going to give you my opinion. I'm not going to judge you. A lot of things with our young people too is that they feel like every time there's something done, whether they're wrong or whether they're right, they feel like they're going to be judged. I listen. I give them a space to speak. And once then they get the space to speak, then I can offer my help and find words. What we have to do, our language and what we say and how we say it is so important to our young people. What would you like for me to do in this situation? Now, if you're being harmed or hurt, of course, there's really not a lot of options there. I'm going to have to do what I need to do for your safety. But as far as even guiding, what can I do to help you?
Right.
What would you like for me to do? And give them even a hand in the decision. A lot of them are really smart and they already know what they want to do. They just want somebody to support them and give them a voice in what they want to be done.
Right. And be non-judgmental about it. Like you said, give them the space to be able to talk about it. And again, if you ask for the space and you want to be non-judgmental, don't get mad at what you hear.
That's right.
You know,
Can I add to that too?
don't get mad.
Yeah,
Can I
absolutely.
add to that
Go ahead.
too?
Yes.
Can I add to that? Okay. I
Yeah.
was just thinking too that children that come from homes that are that are abusive, that are violent, where there has been a mistrust, where the trust has been broken, they're not going to be so quick sometimes to open up to adults. A lot of times, what they're doing is they're opening up to their friends. They're opening up to their peers. And so, what I would think in adding to what she just said is to raise the level of not just awareness, but empathy of our young people in general, so that we can start, or that they can start learning how to, when they see something, say something. When you see someone hurting, when you see someone struggling, when you see something going on, say something to someone. Care enough, not just about yourself, but about the people, your friends or whatnot, so that you can get them the help that they need. So I think
Yes.
that's that as well, because they won't trust sometimes adults, no matter how much of a safe environment you try to create. Sometimes they won't speak.
Yeah. I think, Marissa, you're muted.
When Danielle was talking, she just sits back and she listens, and active listening is key. This is what makes a good advocate, a good defender of children's rights, is somebody that listens. I give zero advice. I listen, and then I, let them vomit on me practically what they want to disclose. And I believe them. I believe you. Sometimes I'm the first person they told, and sometimes I'm the first person that has believed them. And I think that's a huge responsibility. Also, what we do at Human Options is we have a program called Love Shouldn't Hurt. And this is where I go into the middle schools and high schools and colleges, and we talk specifically about the topic that we're talking about today, right? What are those red flags? What does jealousy mean? Jealousy is the number one red flag to look for. We talk about how can you help a friend who's in an abusive relationship? And, parents in America, over 80% of them do not believe that dating abuse is a topic that we need to discuss, because they don't think it's happening to their kid, but it's 1 out of every 3 youth. Could you imagine if 1 out of every 3 youth, their arm turned pink, like they just had a pink arm and they were walking around Earth with the pink arm? All of us would take notice and be like, oh, why is there kids with pink arms? But because it's a hidden epidemic, nobody talks about. And another thing, 81% of high school counselors would not know what to do if one of their students disclosed to them. So training, prevention work is the key. If any of your followers, Tanya, would like to invite Human Options to do these presentations, they're more than welcome to email me. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Other resources, Lisa, are you all doing like workshops or trainings, or do you provide resources for those who need additional training or help?
Well, just in general, every county child welfare office has either a 211. So every county has a 211 where you can gather information. And then there's community partners. There are foster family agencies. There are counseling and other mental health providers that help engage some of the children and youth that we work with in general. So, and you can always call. Every county has a hotline that you can call for just information. So that they can also give you the, resources that are in each city and in each community. And so, I kind of would start there with the 1-800 numbers. I know sometimes you think you're only calling in, child abuse are calling into the hotline, but the hotline for every county, especially our surrounding counties, Riverside, San Bernardino, Orange County, all have a hotline number that you can call and ask for just general resources if you need to reach out.
All right. Well, ladies, we are almost at the end of our show, and I would love to give everyone an opportunity to have final thoughts about what we've been sharing today, and also how we can reach out to you after the show. We'll start with you, Tanya.
Okay. Well, what comes to my mind, I hope I'm on. Okay, yeah, you can hear me.
Yeah.
What comes to my mind, we asked this question. I just want to leave this because this is important, is that we asked that question earlier on, is do teens who witness domestic violence in their homes, are they likely to repeat it? Or is this a pattern that they'll have as being a victim or an abuser? Well, I would like to just add this. It doesn't have to be. One of the most important things is that if protective factors are in place, then the likelihood for a young person, for a child to thrive, to overcome is higher. And of course, this will feed on into them as into their adulthood. So the reality is, what are protective factors? Do kids have social supports? Do they have somebody to talk to? Do they have coping skills? Are they learning that? Where can they learn that? Are teachers instilling that in them? How to manage their emotions or uncomfortable emotions in general? Do they have a lifestyle? Is someone teaching them about exercise, about food? Do they have healthy thinking? Or do they just have connections where they feel a sense of purpose, which is huge? Do you have a connection to something? Being able to have a connection also helps feelings of self-worth, self-esteem, and also, most importantly, and this is important to me, is spirituality. Is there a connection to something where they feel that they're connected to God? Because the reality is many people have overcome many traumatic, as she spoke earlier about, her ministry, that they've overcome traumatic past, due to their connection to God and in their faith. And so these are protective factors that can help someone when they're experiencing extreme stress. So it doesn't have to be, well, yeah, we're going to repeat this cycle later. No, they can actually have something in place. If we all as a community come together, schools, whatever adults, healthy adults are in our youth life, to be able to instill these things in them, it can actually help them to thrive later on.
All right, thank you. And Danielle?
Yes, I would just like to say such an honor to be on this panel with all of you amazing women, and I'm so excited about what's next. The thing I would like to leave today with my final thoughts is that abuse is not just regulated to any one culture or any one dynamic or any one socioeconomic status, especially in this pandemic. It's just a human problem and a human tragedy that we must begin to address in all areas. It is time to break generational curses so that our children do not repeat the same patterns that are happening from their families and from their forefathers. It's time to listen. It's time to support. It's time to teach, and it's time to act. And most of all, like Tanya said, you have to have a level of spirituality within it as well. I am a domestic abuse survivor, so I understand how important Christ was in helping me overcome the pain and the hurt and the wounds that I suffered as being domestically abused. One thing I will say is that we have a ministry in Promise Purpose Destiny Ministries called Sister to Sister, where you can reach out to us confidentiality, and we have mentors that will help support you along the way that have gone through some of the same things that others have gone through. That is a safe place that you can come and talk, and we will listen, we will support. We also have an education component where you can teach as well. And so I'm just thankful to be here with you all. You can reach us at www.ppdministry.com. You can reach us on Instagram. And also we have put out a book that is called I'm Still Here by Promise, Purpose, and Destiny Ministries. And also I think books and education is important. This is a book regarding survivors who have suffered domestic abuse, who have suffered sexual abuse, who have gone through trials and tribulations that otherwise would have killed them, but they have broke generational curses. Books are an absolute testimony and resource that lets you know that you are not alone. If somebody else got through it, you can get through it too. You can find this book on Amazon, and it is also on our website, and it will be a blessing. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yes, I have my copy, and I really enjoy it. Yes, yes. Lisa, you have final thoughts, and then Marissa?
I just think, again, I love the opportunity to talk about this and have more discussions again around mental health. I think my thing is just to make sure that we are really standing in a community. Like it's a community of people. The old adage that says, of course, it takes a village to raise a child. And so we need to really, consider that. Where's your village? Make sure that your children, your children's children, and all of our families are connected to people, because again, the connection is important, and so that that they can reach out, they know that there's help, they know that there is support. So again, I appreciate the time, and I'm excited and hope that this panel discussion was going to be a help to somebody.
You're right.
Yes, thank you.
Marissa.
Yes, well, wow, like Danielle said everything I was going to say. Of course, she said it more passionately and more eloquently, but yeah, everything she said, I ditto. One thing I do want to leave with is that we focused a lot on the victim survivors, which is amazing, but we're also forgetting that there is the person who harms and what environment they grew up in, and why are we calling them the person who harms now? We're shifting the lens on how we view this individual, because they're not all monsters. Yes, there are some monsters. Right now, I'm working, and I'm so proud to share this with you guys. I'm working with incarcerated youth. I'm doing an 8-week program with them where we're talking specifically about all of this, because the brain it's so elastic, like the elasticity in the brain, that we can unlearn what was taught to us about domestic violence. Thank you. Peace, love, and harmony to all of you guys. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to share some hotlines that we have available. We are all products of what we see, what we hear, and what we experience. We are raising adult women and adult men. And if we all could do our part and help support and break the cycle of violence, then our world will be much better off if we're all doing our part. And I want to thank you all for being part of this panel. Your information was great information. And I do hope that if someone is in need of finding help for being in a situation, that they will find the resources that you have provided today helpful. So thank you once again for being part of our panel discussion today. And we have those numbers. Human Options has an 800 number. We put them up there for me. There's a Human Options hotline. It's open 24/7. Please reach out. We also have the National Child Abuse Hotline available. And then there is the National Parent Hotline that you can call as a parent. And I believe there was another one. Yes, the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So again, if we could all share, if we see something, say something, as Tanya said earlier. And again, thank you all for joining us today.